We're mostly going to be talking about UMG, which I believe stands for Unreal Motion Graphics, and that is the framework you use in Unreal to build user interfaces. We're going to talk about not all of the individual widgets that are available, but we'll go through a pretty good set of some of the basic ones. Then we're going to talk about how to build our own widgets and how to display them in game. We're going to build a simple pause menu, and by popular request in the Discord, we're going to build some logic for changing our keybinds at runtime. So let's go ahead and hop right in it. This is our project exactly where we left it off. Let's go ahead and create a new UI folder. And this is where we're going to put all the UI classes that we're going to work on today. And what we're going to create is called a widget blueprint. We're going to call this widget blueprint, let's call it pause menu. I'm actually going to get rid of our slope surface here. All right, so we now have a brand new widget. And unlike a standard blueprint, we have this additional designer view. So the widget or the UMG editor has kind of two views. It has designer and graph. Graph is where we can write logic. It's standard blueprint logic. Designer is where we can do the layout for our widget. And to start with, you'll see we've got this canvas panel. Canvases are basically just a blank slate that we can arrange widgets within internally and piece together. Over on the left, you can see I've got a palette. The palette has a bunch of different building blocks that we can use. Like I said, we're gonna look at some of these. We'll look at some of the most useful ones, but there's a lot here. We're not going to go through all of them in this stream. We can also create our own, which I'm going to show you how to do a little bit later. But we'll start simple here. Down at the bottom, we can do UI animation. We're not going to do any animation today, just to keep it simple. And then over on the right, we have kind of like our standard details pane, although this is all UI stuff. So to start with, for our pause menu, all we're going to do is we're going to put pause up on the screen. So we're going to take a text block and just drag it in. There are two ways to add things to a widget. You can either drag it straight in, or you can drag it into the hierarchy. And order matters in the hierarchy. We'll talk about why later, but basically as we add widgets to our widget that we're building up, we will have a hierarchy, and like our canvas panel currently is the parent of all of these different things. So for now, we just need one text block. I am going to anchor the text block in the center of our screen. So you can see up here, this is our anchor selection. Generally, I just use the presets. With a canvas panel, we can put things literally anywhere. I'm going to set our anchor to the center. I'm then going to get rid of our position offset so that we can bring it to the center. And in our text block, I'm going to write the text pause, and I'm going to make it super big. One thing you'll notice is it's not perfectly centered yet. The reason for that is because first, our size is wrong. Let's size it to the content. And second, it has alignment. Alignment goes from 0 to 1. And it basically is saying which portion of the widget is centered on the anchor. So you can see right now I'm at 0, 0, which is the top left of our block. So it is right on our anchor point. What I actually want is for our anchor to point to be halfway. I want it to be dead center of our widget. So to do that, I just set this to 0.5 and 0.5. And now we have a beautiful piece of pause text, y'all. All right, let's go ahead and compile that. And now let's figure out how to put that up on our screen. So when you want to put a widget on screen, you can do it in a lot of different places. If we were doing like a HUD for a character, like let's say we're doing like a health bar and stuff, we would probably put that on the player character. Since we're building a pause menu, and our pause menu can go across multiple characters potentially, like let's say your character could die and be revived or something, we always want to have the pause menu. So I'm actually going to put our pause menu on our player controller, which I believe is in our blueprints folder here. Yeah, so we have our Kilwalla player controller. So first on begin play, I'm going to go ahead and create a widget. It's going to be owned by us, by this player controller. So I'm just going to set it to self. And the one we're going to create is the pause menu. From that, we are going to save it as a variable, which we are going to call widget blueprint. Actually, I'll just call it pause menu widget. Valorant is made in Unreal. Yes, Mizu. We run a heavily modified version of Unreal, but Valorant is built in Unreal. Okay, so we've now created the widget, but it doesn't actually do anything yet. The next thing we need to do is actually put it into our viewport so that we can see it. So to do that, I'm going to create another key binding. We're going to call it pause, and we are going to bind it to the P key by default. Then coming back to our controller, I am going to respond to that player input by adding the pause menu to our viewport. So once I do this, when I press that P key while playing, we should see our pause menu, and we do. Now, obviously the game's not paused right now. Another problem you'll see is I can't get rid of it now. So we've got to write the logic for that as well. I think the way I want to do this is I'm going to have a Boolean, which we're just going to call B is paused. And based on whether or not we are currently paused, we will either add or remove the pause menu widget from the screen. So let's start with that. Let's do a branch node here. How did you modify it? Do you think it's closed source? It's not closed source. You can get the full source code for the engine. All right, so when you press the key, we're going to check if you're paused. If you are not paused, we're going to add it to the viewport. Otherwise, we are going to remove from parent. And remove from parent should take it away from our viewport. Then the last thing that we need to do is we need to toggle our pause state. And in fact, just to keep all of this nice and neat, I'm going to use a sequence node. Let's move all this out here. And what we want to do is we just want to switch the state of paused. So we're going to do a not, which will just toggle it. And then we're going to set paused. So what's going to happen here? Let me just run you through everything that we wrote. Oops. Sorry, just laying out my blueprint a little bit better so that our spaghetti is under control. So you press the pause key. We check if the game is currently paused. If the game is not currently paused, we're going to add our pause widget to the viewport. If it is currently paused, we're going to remove it from the viewport. Then we're going to come down here. We're going to check whether we're paused. We're going to switch paused. If it's false, it'll become true. Otherwise, if it's true, it'll become false. Simple enough. So now we should be able to bring and dismiss our UI. Cool. So now we've got some UI coming up. We are not currently pausing the game. Let me show you how to do that real quick. There is a function called setGamePaused. And we can just pass it the value of what we want our state to be. And now the game should actually pause. Now, when the game is paused, you'll see everything stops. I'm no longer moving around. And in fact, the game is no longer receiving input. So I can't dismiss the pause menu yet. That is easy to fix. The way we fix that is here on this input action, we say execute when paused. So now I can pause and unpause, but I can no longer move while the pause menu is up, and it freezes time. That's correct. So the game simulation basically stops running while the pause menu is up. Cool. So now we have a very basic pause menu. Let's actually put some stuff in it now that we can bring it up. Yeah. Unreal has very robust visual scripting tools. It's super great. I think the first thing that our UI on the pause menu needs is a button to quit the game. So let's go ahead and make a quit game button. We're going to also put that in our canvas panel. I don't really like that positioning. I think I want to anchor it to the bottom left. And again, we're going to reset all of our offsets here. We'll size to content, which will matter once we have content. And I'm going to offset it 50-50. Let's actually remove this so that we can see the button for now. Here, let's make it really big just so we can see what we're doing, hopefully. Where'd my button go? Hang on a second, y'all. All right, there's our button right now. Let's set the alignment to be on the bottom left of our box. That's going to be 0 on X and 1 on Y. So the 0 to 1 goes left to right in the X dimension and top to bottom in the Y dimension. So if I set this to 1, we're now anchoring the bottom of our button here. And I want to offset it, let's say like 50 pixels in both directions. This should be -50, right? There we go. Cool. And the next piece we're going to need here is a label on our button, which we're going to put under our button. So you know how I mentioned you can child stuff within other widgets? We can associate this text with the button by childing it within. And now I'm going to click size to content rather than use that overridden size. And now it'll just match my my text block. Is it possible to optimize the pause menu even further by taking a screenshot of the game and pause it and then display the game as a visual? You could do something like that, Spy, but there's not really any reason to. Are buttons like in Valorant a custom image or whatnot? I'm confused. We'll talk about how to style a button. We get a default button out of the box here, which is what we're looking at right now. I'm going to make this bigger so that we can see what's going on. And we're going to label this as quick game. Let's make it big. And let's make our font a different color. Maybe instead of white, let's like make it black. And I want to give this a name. I'm going to call this button quit game. So buttons have styles. They have a normal style, they have a hovered style, and they have a press style. And each style has a bunch of different options. So I can straight up just like change the color of the button if I want to. Like that's pretty simple. I can also assign a material here. So in a minute, we're gonna make a material and we'll make a really gross looking button. But you can do tons of stuff in the material editor, just like you can with materials in the world. And you can have a different setup for hovered or for pressed. So real quick though, let me show you what that looks like in game if I bring it up now. So you see I have my quick game button. Now we have another problem, which is I don't have a mouse. And the reason I don't have a mouse is because my mouse is currently going to the game simulation, which is paused. So we need to do one more thing here. First, we need to set our input mode. There are 3 input modes. There's game and UI, game only, and UI only. I'm not going to go super in detail into the differences here, but I need to be in UI mode only or game and UI in order to interact, in order to be able to click on my buttons. So let's get that set up real quick. I want to focus on my pause menu widget. So we'll wire that up for widget to focus. And again, we need a reference to the player controller that we're currently in, which is easy because we're adding this code to our player controller. All right. We also, when we are removing it, we need to go back to game only, input mode, game only. And again, we're going to wire it up to our own player controller. No big deal. Then I think the last thing we need is show mouse cursor. Yes. So when we're in the game, we don't need to show the mouse cursor. When we are out of the game, when we're in UI mode, we do want to show the mouse cursor. So now I should have a mouse cursor. Let's check. Cool. So I have a mouse cursor. You'll also, so you can see when I like hover over the button, the color changes. Similarly, when I press it, things happen. It's not wired up to any logic, but you can see how the styling works here. The other thing you'll notice is right now my cursor just goes anywhere, which is not what I want. I'm going to set my mouse to lock. And now when I bring up the menu, my cursor no longer leaves the window. So it stays in the game window. And this is basically everything we're going to need in the controller. I think for the rest of this, we're mostly just going to be working on our widget. So let's go ahead and implement quick game. This is pretty easy. I've got my button marked as a variable, which is the default. And the reason that's useful is I can come over to my blueprint graph and I can now bind an event when my quick game button is clicked rather. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to call quick game. And quit preference, quit, ignore platform restrictions. Okay, so this would matter for console maybe. Doesn't matter for us right now. Now, when I pause, if I quit, the game exits. we've got a quick game button. We are so advanced, y'all. So I also mentioned you can do materials. Let's make a quick and dirty material for our button, just so that we can see what that looks like. So I want a new material. Let's call this MUI button. And I don't know, let's have like a pulsing blue color or something. So for UI materials, you have to set the material domain to user interface, which has a different set of pens. I'm going to set the blend mode to translucent so we get some opacity. I'm going to make our button semi-transparent. Let's set the opacity to 0.5. And then let's do a color computation. So a handy shortcut in the material editor, if you ever need a constant, you can hold 1 and click to create a single float constant. You can hold 2 and click to create a 2 vector constant. And you can hold 3 and click to create a 3 vector constant, which is useful because the 3 vector constant can represent a color. So like if I want like a nice blue here, maybe something like that. And then, so like right now, if I just do this, all we're doing is basically changing the color, which is like not very impressive, but I'll show you how that gets wired up real quick. And then we're gonna do something a little more fun with our material, I think. So let's only change the normal style. We're not gonna worry about hovered or selected. You just come to image. I don't know why it's called image instead of material. I feel like this is not a very good name, but it's what it is. It can take any material though. So now I've got a semi-transparent blue button. And if I bring it up, you can see there it is. And as I mentioned, we're only changing the normal style, so hovered and pressed aren't changed here. Now, I want to have a little bit more fun than this, so let's make it pulse. An easy way to do that is we can take, I think it's just time as an input. So let's take time as an input. Let's throw that through a sine function. And sine is between -1 and 1. We want it between 0 and 1. So the way we're going to do that is we're always going to add 1 to it. And then we are going to divide that by 2, which is the defaults here. So that is all great. So now we're going to have a number between 0 and 1, and we are going to multiply our color by that number. And I believe this is going to make our button just pulse the color. Let's apply that. Why is it not doing it? There it goes. Okay, so you can see now our button pulses. That's a little bit too fast for me. So let's slow it down a little bit. We're just going to do that by multiplying time by, well, let's make it a quarter of the speed. Multiply time by 0.25. Cool. So we've got a simple material now. We've got a pulsing blue button. It will slowly pulse at us. It's kind of gaudy, definitely some programmer art, but you know, it works, right? Pretty cool, right? And the reason I show you this is just so when you're thinking about like building out UI, be aware that you can do all sorts of stuff here because you have the full power of the material editor. You don't have to just do colors and stuff. So like I could sample textures, I could like be doing an animation behind the scenes. You can do all sorts of cool stuff. Another thing that I don't really like here is I think our pause menu is like a little bit hard to see. So let's look at, let's look at another common piece of our palette called background blur. So background blur is like relatively expensive to render. Don't use these throughout your UI because they have a lot of GPU cost, but it's totally fine for a pause menu because not a lot's going to be going on here. I'm going to anchor it to the entire screen. I'm going to remove these offsets and make this offset 0 as well on the right and the bottom. And then I can blur out the background by adjusting this blur strength slider. So like if I go to like 50, it's going to be really strong. And you know, I mentioned that the order of this stuff matters. And the order in the canvas panel is the order things draw in. So if I put my background blur down here at the bottom it's actually going to blur my widgets, which is not what we want. Here, let's make this weaker so that you can still see them. So you can see my pause text and my quick game button are blurred, which is not what we want. If I bring it up one level so that it's after pause but before quick game, my button is visible but my pause is blurred out. I don't want that. If I put it here at the top, it's going to just blur out everything behind my widget. I've got my blur strength at 2.5 right now. Let's go ahead and play the game and I'll show you what it looks like. So you can see I'm now blurring out my game a little bit, which helps separate out my UI layer and make it more visible. I can also make it a lot stronger just to show you what that looks like. So if I make my background blur 50, you can see I basically can't see the game anymore. It's just totally blurred out. So we don't want that. That's too much, but you know, maybe like 5 is good. Let's try that, see what it looks like. Where did my game go? Here we go. Let's try again. There we go. Yeah, that looks like a good blur, I think. So cool. We've got our quit button. We've got pause. We've got a nice background blur, which helps separate it out. On the blur, you'll also see there's this low quality fallback stuff. Basically, if you're on a weaker machine, if you're on low settings where the blur might be too expensive, you can choose to replace it with a simple brush. So I could just make it like solid black or something. What if you want to use custom animations though? You can either animate in the UI itself, or you could have a material that does some kind of animation. Can you change the color? I don't know if you can change the color of like a blur. Oh, look, there's a tint. Is that tint just on? I think that's on the low quality fallback. I would probably combine a blur with something like a border if I wanted to change the coloring on it. But we can look at an example of that a little bit later, I think. Okay, so we've got a basic pause menu now. We show the pause text. We show the quick game button. Another thing I'll show y'all, I'm not going to worry about it here because we're just building on my PC right now. But something that's cool about the UMG editor is you can also simulate a bunch of different screen sizes to see what your UI looks like. So if I'm on like a 27-inch monitor, this is what my UI is going to look like on 2560 by 1440. Similarly, if I was building a game for a phone and I wanted to like see what it looks like on an iPhone 7, you can change the resolution and see what it's going to do. You can also manually change the size and see how it stretches and moves around. If you're building a game for a bunch of different devices and form factors, this is something you have to care about. If you're just on PC, you know, it's a little bit simpler usually. For us, we're just going to build for 1920 by 1080 right now and not worry about it. So the next thing that I want to build here is I want to like build a little settings menu so that we can actually do the keybind stuff that we talked about. And the way we're going to do that is with 2 parts. We're going to use a horizontal box to start with, I think. So horizontal box and vertical boxes contain child widgets and automatically separate the space underneath them. So I'm going to take this horizontal box. I'm going to put it down here at the bottom of my hierarchy. And right now it doesn't have anything in it, so it's pretty small. I am going to... How do I want to anchor this? Maybe let's start with like a full screen anchor. And then I think I'm going to offset it a little bit to kind of get just in the region I want. Let's do 25 pixels on the left and on the right. Maybe 25 pixels off the top. And I'm going to bring the bottom up, I don't know, like 150. Hey, that actually worked out perfectly, right above our quick game button. And then within our horizontal box, I'm going to have like a list of screens that we can go through. So think like keybinds, graphics, audio, right? Like all of our different menus. And then we're going to have a pane over on the right, which actually shows the settings for the setting that we're selected on right now. There's also a pretty useful locale preview switch. Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff here for visualizing your UI. So you can change your language as well if you want to make sure that your text is properly translated and not truncated. We're not going to deal with that in this stream, but that is an option. Can you move the quit game button to the right side? You don't like it on the left side? Sure, I can do that. That's easy. Let's see here. So we need to come back to our quit game button. Let's make our anchor on the right side. Let's change this stuff. Now we want to anchor to the bottom right. So we're going to make our alignment 1, 1. And then we just need to do, what is it, like -50, -50? Yeah, just like that. Happy, Lucho? It's on the right side now. But very easy to move that stuff around. All right, so in our horizontal box, I mentioned we want to have a list of stuff. Those lists of settings menus. We're going to do that with a vertical box. So the vertical box is going to contain our list of settings. And let's also have, well, let's do, yeah, let's build all this out. On our right side, we're going to have a widget switcher. And what a widget switcher does is it allows you to load another widget within it. So we're actually going to author our like our graphics screen and our Keybinds screen separately. We're going to do that a little bit later, but let's kind of get this set up. So in our vertical box, I think I want him to be 1/3 of the screen. So I can set size to fill, and it will fill up the entire space available. And I'm going to do the same for my widget switcher. The way this works is across the horizontal box, it adds up all of the size values that you provide when you're doing fill. And then it takes the sum of those, and then it does division to figure out how much of the screen you should fill up. So if I say I want my vertical box to have size 1 and my widget switcher to have size 2, my vertical box is going to get 1/3 of the space, and my widget switcher is going to get 2/3 of the space. Proportional, exactly. I'm also going to put a little bit of padding here. So I'm going to put 25 pixels of padding on the vertical box's right side and 25 pixels of padding on the left side of my widget switcher. I'm also going to go ahead and delete my pause text because I don't think we need it anymore. So now in our vertical box, let's put some more text labels here. Actually, these should probably be buttons. Let's put some buttons here. So let's just make one button first. Let's put some text on that button. And let's go ahead and call this first one Keybinds. I'm going to make my font bigger again. Let's make it 48. I like the text centered, I think. No, actually, you know what? I want the text to be left justified. So let's do that. I still want the button to take the entire space so that the player can click anywhere here. Let's go ahead and change our style here. I just want a nice, like, transparent background, I think. I don't really want to show that little button view. So let's do that, and let's also make our text here black. Where is my color? There's my color. Cool. So we have Keybinds. Let's call this button Keybinds. And I want to copy it. I can press Control W to make a copy. I'm going to call this button graphics. And we're going to make the text on that be graphics. In a vertical box, one of the things that's cool is I can just reorder things by pressing these little arrows. So once I populate this list, if I want to move things around, it's very easy. So now, if I play my game, and if I bring up our pause menu, you see it's like we have these buttons. When I click them, nothing happens yet. That's okay. We'll make that work here in a minute, and we have the ability to quit our game. So over in our widget switcher, we want to show a couple of different widgets. Let me go ahead and just create some empty widgets as a starting point. First, I'm going to create a Keybinds pane. And I'm also going to create a graphics pane. And for now, I'm just going to put like a text block in them, and we'll actually implement them here in a minute. So let's just have Keybinds as our text in the Keybinds pane. And let's have some text that says graphics in our graphics pane. And we don't need to worry about where these are placed because we're going to come clean this up in a minute. This is just to prove to ourselves that we're doing something here. So now if I come back to our pause menu, under our widget switcher, now that I've created additional widgets, I can come to user created, and I can add these to my widget switcher. And I want to put my Keybinds one first. So if I'm on the Keybind pane in the widget switcher, you'll see it says Keybinds. And if I'm on the graphics pane, it says graphics. Now the graphics is off screen because I've done a bad job here, but that's okay. We're going to fix all that in just a minute. Easy. So now we need to make these buttons change the widget that we're looking at. And to do that, I need to do a few things. Widget switcher settings. All right, so that's marked as variable. Good. Our graphics and keybinds buttons are also marked as variables, and these are also variables. Great. So this should all be very easy, I think. So just like what we did with our quit button, rather, I need to write a little bit of logic for our graphics button and our keybinds button. So let's go ahead and pull those events out onto our graph. All we have to do here, I actually don't like that name. Let's call it widget switcher settings pane. All right. So we get that and we say, I think it's set active widget. Yep. So when you click on the graphics button, what I want to do is I want to change the active widget to the graphics pane. And when you change, or when you click the keybinds pane, I want to change it to the keybinds pane. And I think that's all we need to be able to switch between the two. I'm going to go ahead and just put these in the top right for now, so that it's guaranteed to show up. We'll do that real fast. Now, if I play my game, you see we're on the keybind screen right now, and if I come to graphics, we're on the graphics pane. Let me get caught up here on chat. Can you make motion blur setting default off? Yes, you can. There is a setting for that. But yeah, we got a little switcher here. We are well on our way. Widget switcher is incredibly useful. Absolutely. So let's come back to our pause menu now. You know, another thing that I think I want to do here is I want to make it clear what we're changing. So let me show y'all another common widget, the border widget. And I need to actually put it here and then put my widget switcher within it. And I need to reapply my fill settings. So by default, I think this is a background image, which is not what I want. I just want to draw a border. I want to make the margin size 1 everywhere so that we're drawing all around. I'm going to make my brush solid black. Will this do what I want? It's hard to see in the preview, but I think that will give us a border. Yes. So you can see now we're drawing a big rectangle around the pane that we're changing. You wonder if Valorant uses Slate UI directly, not just UMG. We mostly use UMG. UMG is built on top of Slate. So I think we have like maybe a few widgets written directly in Slate that we then use in UMG, but most of what we do is just UMG. Okay. So we've got our pane, we can switch it. Let's go ahead and implement keybinds. Let me save all this stuff and close some of it down, so in case the editor crashes, I don't lose my work. I don't need the controller anymore, and we're not going to do anything with the graphics pane today, but if we wanted to do graphics settings, that's how we do it. All right, so I don't actually want a canvas panel here for my keybinds pane. I think what I want is a scroll box. And a scroll box basically has a bunch of items in it, and if the items get big enough to overflow it, you get a scroll wheel. You can also configure it to always show the scroll wheel, which I'll show you, but we're not actually going to use. So you can see here over on the right now, I have a scroll bar, and if I had a ton of items here, I could scroll up and down. We're only going to have a few settings, so it probably won't come up, but I think that's probably the right type for our container here. Am I using electronic nodes? I am. Do I upload these live streams to YouTube? Yes, I do. You can check out the YouTube channel and see the VODs that we've done so far. I edit the VODs a little bit, so they're a little bit cleaner on the YouTube. You've always been curious about how the Blueprint C++ balance is in Valorant. We use C++ for core systems, and we write most of the game logic in Blueprint. So like most characters are implemented entirely in Blueprint. We have like a base character class in C++. All right, so we don't want text here. We are actually going to want a collection of keybind setting widgets, which do not exist yet. So let's create the widget that we're going to use there. We're going to call it widget blueprint keybind setting. And we are going to, let's use a horizontal box as our outer widget. And in our horizontal box, I think we're going to need a text widget. We're going to need a couple things here, but let's start with just a text widget. So let's call this keybind display, or text keybind display name. And we will implement this in just a second, but I am going to go ahead and put a couple of our new widgets here. Keybind settings. And so, like I said, you just have like this list of keybind setting widgets in our scroll box. And then if we come back to our pause menu, you can see we've got that pane. So we're basically nesting widgets within one another. Am I using Instagram? No, I'm not on Instagram. Your editor now crashes 100% when you start your game since you don't have a custom net driver ready. I hope you have source control so that you can easily go back. All right, let's start figuring out how to implement our keybind setting. So we need a couple of pieces of configurable information, I think. The first is we need the keybind display name and the keybind name. And I think our display name is what we're going to show the player. And let's make that a text string. And our name is going to be the name of the actual action mapping, which lives over here. So that's going to be like interact, jump, spray, reset VR, pause, stuff like that. And so these might be the same, but we can also change them. So like if I wanted to have an action mapping named interact, I could, instead of showing interact to the player, maybe that's not the best name, I could set a different display name like press switch. So to give you an example, let's set our, where do I set my defaults here? I'm blind. These need to be instance editable. Maybe I change them on my designer. Yes, that's where I change them, I think. I also want to give these a group so they're easy to find. Keybinds. All right, so if I come to my designer here, what we should see is, where is it? I'm blind. Here they are, keybind display name. So like, let's say I want to call my display name press switch, and I want to call my keybind name interact because that's what we have it named in code. So that'll be my default for now. And if I come over to my keybinds pane, I can actually, I have to compile and save first. For each keybind setting, I can change those values. So like, let's call this keybind jump. Let's call this next one keybind interact. And let's call the final one keybind spray. And so for jump, we're going to use display name jump. And I think in project settings, we also have it named jump. Yes. So let's do jump, jump, press switch, interact, and then we'll just call spray and spray for our last one. So the next piece that we need to do is actually show the string that we just set. And that is easy enough to do. Over here on this text block, we need to make this a variable. And let's default it. Well, I don't have to default it. It's fine. It can be empty for now. In this pre-construct node, we can run some logic that runs both at game time and at design time, which is super useful because I can do things like set text. Set text. And the text that we are going to set is that display name that we had our designer provide. So now, if I come back to our designer view, you can see it says press switch, which is what we expect. Similarly, if I come to my keybinds pane, jump, press switch, spray, all the values that I set there. Hi, Eric. How are you doing today? So this is coming along. The last piece is how do we actually do the keybind? First of all, I want to use the full space that's available to me. I'm going to make this have size 1 again. The last type of widget that comes out of the box that we're going to talk about today is called an input key selector. And our input key selector allows us to capture input from the player, which is exactly what we want when we're building things like a keybind. And again, I don't want this style. I think it looks kind of gross. So let's just turn down the alpha on all of that. Let's do it for all three this time. So we'll make it see-through. Get that fixed up. There we go. And then let's make our text consistent across all of these. So let's make that size, let's make individual keybinds like size 36, I think. Keybind selector. We'll name that. Where's my font settings? Text style. That's where my font settings are. Let's make the color white just to make it match. I'll go into my font settings. We're also going to make that size 36. I guess we can have these be centered instead of left aligned. That looks fine to me. Then we have a few other settings. We have key selection text, which is what it shows when we're actually selecting something. I'm going to call it press any key. And we have some fallback text when nothing is specified. I'm going to just make that be none. So now what you're going to see is when I bring up my pause menu, I have things I can select that say press any key. They don't currently do anything. Right now, like they capture a value, but it doesn't actually change any binds. So like my P key still loads pause, but like these are not actually wired up to input. So my spacebar still jumps despite it saying that my jump key is P, which is not what we want. That is because we haven't written our logic. So the first thing that we need to do to write our logic is we need to tell our keybind selector what the current value is. And we can do that by looking at our input settings. I am doing good, Eric. So from our input settings, we can do, I think it's called get action mapping by name. So in our settings, we have action mappings and we have axis mappings. We're only going to deal with action mappings today, but axis mappings are basically the same. It's just that for forward, you have to deal with like WNS or up and down. So it's a little bit more complicated to wire up, but it's the same general idea. We're just going to worry about the action mappings for this tutorial. So our action name, we're going to get from the keybind name that we already created, which our designer has set for us. Then we want to check, we're also only going to worry about like a single keybind per action mapping. You can do multiple things, but it would make this code a little bit more complicated. So we'll deal with that in the future, I think. Is valid index. Let's see if we have one. If we have one, that will be in the 0th index. So let's do get at reference point 0, or at index 0 rather. We'll only do this if we have something. Cool. So we're going to come into this branch. We are going to look up the keybind name that was provided by our designer. We are going to see if we have a valid keybind set up for it. If we do, we then need to set selected key. Yes, set selected key. And our selected key is going to come from that action mapping that we just looked up. Sadly, I can't pin this straight in, and the reason is that these are different types. So we got to do a little bit of spaghetti management here because they're different types, but it's not a big deal. The difference is the action name is part of this type, but it's not part of the set selected key signature type. So we're just gonna wire everything through here. And now what should happen is whenever I play my game, it's going to show us the binds that we actually have set. So like spacebar, F, and T. So now it's reading the correct values, but the problem is we still haven't done the logic to actually change the binds. So if I change my spray key to E, it'll show up in the UI, but it still won't spray. T is still the bind. So the last thing that we need to do is write the logic to actually change the keybind. And the way we do that is respond to this onKeySelected event. So whenever the player comes in, clicks one of our binds, and then inputs another key like Shift E, that will fire the on key selected event and it will tell us what the key is. Easy enough, right? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to clear out any previous keybinds when this happens. So the way we're going to do that is we're just going to write a loop that goes through all of the current action mappings for the keybind that is associated with this widget. And on the loop body, here, I need another reference to our input settings, I think. We want to do remove action mapping. And we're going to remove the current one that we just retrieved. So this will clear out the existing key binding every time. And again, I could come, I guess this is all right. Let's come off the completed node here. So after we do that, we want to add a new action mapping. Actually, I changed my mind. I don't want to do it here. I want to use a sequence node. It'll be cleaner. Thank you for being patient with my OCD. Sequence. I'm just making the layout nicer. That's all we're doing right now. So we have a loop that goes through and clears any existing keybinds or any existing action mappings on the keybind name. Then we're going to come through and we're going to say add action mapping to add the new one. And again, these are different types, so we have to do a little bit of work here, but it's not too bad. Let's reroute that. I want to split this out. I want to split this out. Actually, I'll do it down here. Break input chord. And so that same wiring we did when looking up the name before we do here. Shift to shift, control to control, alt to alt, command to command. I think command is only if I'm on like a Mac. I don't think that's on Windows. And then the last step is I need to save key mappings. I don't think this matters in editor, but it will matter when we're running the actual standalone game. I think that's it. What did I mess up? I am missing a reference to input settings on these functions. That's what I messed up. All right. I think that is everything, chat. Let's see. So now let's say instead of spraying with T, I want it to be Control-Shift-E. Oh, Shift-E, Control-E. Can I do Control-Shift? It looks like it doesn't work with multiple modifiers. I don't know why, actually. I'll have to look into that. But now if I come to the wall and press Shift-E, nope, it doesn't work. T also doesn't work. All right, well, let's see what we screwed up. Let's look at our project settings. Oh my goodness. It's a disaster, chat. All of our key bindings disappeared. That's not what we want. I know what happened. I forgot to wire something up. All right, let's clear all this out. Let's fix it. We got to rebuild our mappings. See, this is the challenge now. If we make mistakes in our logic, we're changing it for real. So it's a good thing I only had a few binds because I just nuked them all from orbit by accident because I have a bug in my code. That's okay. We're going to fix it. And then the last one was called interact. Cool. All right, let's go see what our bug is here. The bug is that when I set the new one, I set it with name none instead of with the keybind name. I forgot to wire up that piece of logic. Now I think it's going to work. Let's try again. All right, so we have our binds. If I change the spray key to Shift E and close this to Shift E spray, it does, and T no longer sprays. And it'll remember that. Like this is changing it for real. So even across sessions now, if I come in, it's still going to be Shift E. And if I come into my project settings and look at it, same thing. You can see it Shift E here. So that's it, chat. Like we now have perfectly functional keybinds. That's most of what I wanted to show you today. But you know, what was that? That was like an hour and we got through it pretty quick. Just to review everything that we did here today, we created a pause menu. Our pause menu has a bunch of different types of widgets. We did the quit button, which has custom styling on it. We used horizontal and vertical boxes to lay this out in a pleasing fashion. We have buttons here that are used to drive our widget switcher selection. That happens over here in the graph. So when you click these buttons, we change the active widget in the widget selector. A quick game button just calls quick game, as we discussed. We then implemented a keybinds pane, which is a scroll box of keybind setting widgets. We set default parameters for display name and the keybind name, which is used to look up the action mapping. I don't think we have any logic here. Yeah, there's no logic here. This is basically just a container of these individual widgets. Then in our keybind setting widget, we have a text field and a keybind selector, or an input key selector, in a horizontal box. We populate the text field using the display name provided by our designer, and we set the input selector key based on the actual action mapping that we're looking up with the name provided by our designer. Then, whenever a player clicks on our input key selector and changes the key, we take the key that they provided, we clear out all of the action mappings associated with that keybind name, and then we save the new one. Easy peasy. The only other piece that we had to implement today was on our controller, which I think I've closed, but if I reopen, on our controller, in begin play, we created our widget and saved it to our variable. Then on our pause keybind, if the game is not paused, we add our widget to the viewport. We set our input mode to game and UI so that we're able to click on our buttons, and we turn on the mouse cursor. Then we actually pause the game. If the game was paused, we remove our pause menu from the viewport. We turn the input back to game only. We hide our mouse cursor and we unpause the game. That's it. Any questions? I gotta put this back to T, otherwise I'm gonna be confused later. Yeah, everything works. Hey, Lopano. Is pause state managed by the game mode or the game instance? I don't know where that's implemented. Probably on the game mode, because I think a pause would be acknowledged by the server. But I'd have to actually look at where the blueprint function is implemented. Your game instance is going to be local to your client, so that is probably not the right place for it. Where's the pause call? That's on the controller, right? Did I close it again? No, here it is. It's on gameplay statics. And so I'd have to look at the code to see what it actually does here. We'll see if it finds it. For a network game, which is a better place? Well, again, like if you're having pause in a network game, it depends what you want, right? Like if you want to pause for all players and pause the simulation, then the server is going to need to acknowledge it. Let's see. Set game pause. This is going to find it. Let's see what it does. We can just read the source code. Is it standard to create widget and construct and then just remove an add? That's what I'm doing because I don't feel like I need to create it every time. So it looks like it calls through the player controller. My search is lagging here. Oh my goodness. I'm just looking at the engine source real quick, chat. Yeah, so it calls the game mode, which is what I would expect. So it says, hey, game mode, please pause for me. Is it standard to create a widget and construct or just remove an add? So like I could create it every time, but there is overhead every time you create and destroy a widget. I'm not sure how much of that is happening when I call add to viewport anyways. I haven't measured, but in general, like I want to do the work once. I also don't want to hitch the game the first time you create. So by doing it on begin play, I know that I've got the widget available. Like to have a local player pause the menu, but have the server get status and display a label above the player. So like if you don't want to pause for all players, then I probably wouldn't even call set game paused. Instead, what I would do is I'd bring up the menu for that player and communicate some state to the server to communicate to other players that that player's in the menu. Would Valorant benefit much from a lower level graphics API like DX12 or Vulkan? If so, would that de facto raise the minimum specs of the game? So we're definitely going to continue to support DX11 because we've got lots of machines that are on that. We probably wouldn't benefit much from DX12 or Vulkan just because rendering is not really the bottleneck for modern hardware for us. You're doing UI at the moment, blame me? Awesome. Damn you pointers. Yeah, when you get into C++ land, you have to deal with the pointers. That's true. Any other questions? How have you optimized Valorant to Intel HD graphics? It was a lot of work, Dante. It was a lot of work. I talked about some of it in a video we did with Epic. I don't know if we have a command for it. Yeah, there's the link for that. You can check it out. But it was a lot of work. Mostly by paring down the renderer. Valorant after this? Yeah, we'll do some Valorant after this. Helpful type for dealing with pointers, T-shared putter. Yeah, so it's tricky because in Unreal, your gameplay classes are all garbage collected. So you don't actually need shared putters, but stuff in like the slate layer is not garbage collected. And so there you do have to do shared putter and stuff. It depends what you're doing exactly. But like raw pointers in gameplay logic are safe because they're managed by Unreal as long as they're annotated with U property and live in a U class. Where did you get the light map? Blender or Unreal build? We build our light maps in Unreal. So in Unreal, you can come here and say build lighting, and this will generate our light maps. If you're working with core systems in C++, like game engine or online subsystem, yes, for sure. Where are input settings saved in a file? Yes, I think there's an INI file. I forget exactly where it is. Let me see. Let me go off monitor here and see if I can find it real quick. I'm gonna check real quick. I don't know if I know the location handy, but there's a player settings somewhere in your config. Let's see here. Saved config. Windows. Editor per project user settings, maybe? No, I don't think that's it. Open with Visual Studio Code. Let's see here. So there's a whole bunch of settings here, but I don't remember where the bindings are. An engine.ini. Let's look. Spray. No. No, that's not it. Oh, input.ini maybe? Nope. I don't know where it is. I have to go look for it. But there's a file that has all of your settings. It's in one of the ini folders. Valorant stores most of your settings in a service, and so when you move from machine to machine, you can retrieve your saved settings. Does Valorant implement a custom online subsystem, or you just rolled up custom management for sessions and stuff? We don't use the online subsystem modules at all. We deleted them and wrote our own layer, so it's totally different from Unreal. Blur background is more costly than rendering map. Blurs are very expensive. I don't think I have RenderDoc set up right now. Maybe I do. Do I have RenderDoc on this machine? Let's see if I can show you. I don't know if I have RenderDoc installed is the problem. Let's save everything. This might crash and burn. But yes, blurs are quite expensive. It has to sample a bunch of pixels for every pixel it's rendering. So it's a lot. Why does Riot choose to launch the right games launched, which then click the play button? I don't know, Poppy. I didn't work on that. I don't really know the reasoning there. Okay, let's see. So we were talking about light maps earlier, and y'all saw I regenerated our light maps, and I think actually here somewhere, if you want to see them, thought they were here. Yeah, these are all the light maps from our world right now that were generated by Swarm. So if you ever want to inspect your light maps, you can. Low quality light map. Where's a high quality light map? There it is. There's my light map, chat. Okay, I don't have RenderDoc installed, so my RenderDoc plugin's not going to do anything. Maybe in a future one, I can show you just how expensive a blur is by looking at what the GPU has to do, but I don't have that set up right now. Did I work on the networking part of Val? If so, what do you recommend to start learning? There are entire courses on the networking model in Unreal. And that would be what I would recommend to understand. Like, you got to learn how replication, RPCs, and authority works. And there's a whole bunch of stuff there. When's the ray tracing stream for this map? I don't have a GPU that supports ray tracing, so not until I get my new computer. I've actually never played with any of the ray tracing features in Unreal. When I have hardware, maybe we can tinker some, see what we can learn. For tourneys, do you just send an old build of the game to the players so they play on old patches? We have a special tournament patch line that we can use, and it can have a different build than what's on live. And that's useful if we need to do like a slightly different bug fix or something, or want to guarantee stability, or if we want to keep the build the same across like multiple stages of a series. Right, like we don't want to patch in the middle of a series if you have like games on day 1 and games on day 2, but we still want the ability to patch live. I think you have to have a ray tracing GPU to use the ray tracing feature, Shady. I'm not sure if they have any software emulation. I've never tried. Maybe they have something, but like I would expect that if you're building a game that is going to be using ray tracing features, then you need ray tracing hardware to test it. I don't know if you'll be able to see that patch line, Chick. I think that stuff it has a different set of entitlements. Tell IT you need an RTX card so you can test ray tracing for Valorant too. Yeah, exactly, right. Did we remove the online subsystem code explicitly, or just not using it was enough? Not using it is enough. At one point we deleted it, but I think we've brought it back for unrelated reasons. Early in the project, we just deleted huge swaths of the engine that we weren't using. In general, we've moved away from that because it's kind of a pain in the butt when we're taking a new version and there are changes to those files. But we don't use it. Will there be a comp spike rush? Gosh, I hope so. Let's save our work here, chat. Yeah, commit. Implement. Pause menu. All right, chat. I am going to use the restroom real quick, and then we'll play some video games, okay? I like the Windows terminal so far. How many drives do I have? I have 2 M2 SSDs in this card on this machine, and I think I currently have 1 8 terabyte hard drive and 4 12 terabyte hard drives in this machine. So a lot. I used to have more hard drives, but a couple years ago, I upgraded to beefier hard drives. I have room for 12 hard drives in my chassis. What version of Unreal is on? Will you move to the newest version when a new version comes out? We're currently on 424 and we're currently working on upgrading to 425. We generally stay about 1 version behind latest. So the latest version is 426, which is why we're upgrading to 425. And that's just for stability concerns. All right, chat, I need a quick restroom break, but I'll be back in like 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. See you in a little bit.